Hey folks, it's Michael with the reasonrxpodcast back again. Hope you're doing all right, staying sane and healthy in all this COVID mess, getting a lot done, good family time, taking advantage of the situation and making lemonade out of lemons, getting outdoors and trying a lot of new things. We need new things in life. Helps us stay interested, stay engaged. Today, we're here talking with master chess player Chris Land. Been playing for decades, teaching for decades. So we're going to discuss some pedagogy involved in teaching chess, thinking skills involved in teaching and playing chess, what chess is about, lessons we can learn from it for other areas. Focusing more on the thinking side. Of course, having to be concrete about things because that's the nature of thinking correctly. Being concrete, not all airy-fairy, but got to discuss some stuff, but it's not going to be like chess class entirely. It's thinking skills and stuff involved in chess. But could you introduce yourself, Chris? Say hi.
Hello, I'm Chris Land. I'm a FIDE Master. There's three categories at the top of the chess world. There's a Grandmaster, and then International Master, and then FM, FIDE Master is what I am. That's the International Chess Federation.
How many of each are there?
What's that?
How many are in the top?
Just in the United States, approximately there are 150 Grandmasters. There are about 300 International Masters and about 500 FIDE Masters. So I'm in that third group.
Cool.
So I'm roughly in the top 1,000 players nationally, but near the top. Top 1,000. There really is a very, very large gap between my skill levels and the skill levels of the players who are much stronger than me.
Wow, cool. But anything else you'd like to say about your background and what you do? And
I've been playing chess for a very long time. I've been a master for a long time. I've taught players here and there. I don't have a school or anything like that, but generally, when I go to chess places, I'm one of the strongest players there. I also am very good at teaching it, and so over the years, I've taught a lot of students who are already pretty good, and I help them reach their potential that much more quickly.
Mm-hmm. So you don't work with beginners at all?
Not generally, no. I mean, obviously, if there's a beginner here and we want to talk about it, I will do that, but that's not my teaching focus.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, it's kids, but any player really that's already pretty advanced and is motivated to get even better.
Cool. So, anything else you want to say about your background, or shall we get into talking about chess and everything?
Well, I could talk about myself for a long time, so don't tempt me.
Okay.
It's your podcast, so I want to go where you want to go with it.
Okay. All right. So first of all, we're talking about chess, so people kind of know what chess is. You got the board and you got the pieces and stuff, but what can you say about the rudiments and more theoretical parts of chess and the more advanced ways to look at it? How would you describe chess?
Well, one of the really unusual features of the chess culture is the existence of the rating system. And so a rating is a number. It's typically a 4-digit number, like say between 800 and 2800. And that number is a measure of your chess skill. And you obtain a rating by competing with other players who already have ratings. And the ratings are constantly fluctuating, so if you do very well, then your rating is going to go up. If you do poorly, your rating is going to go down. And over time, this pool of players, the ratings change and move. And so there's always this sense of, that's actually in the chess world, when you start talking to another person about chess, the first thing you want to know is, well, what's your rating? And it's a proxy. It says how good you are. Now, if you have two players whose ratings are, let's say, within 100 points of each other, they're approximately this similar skill level. Once you start getting to be 400, 500, 800 points apart, well, the one with a higher rating is clearly a better player, and there's no one that really disputes that. It's very, very obvious superiority. Now, when that translates over into teaching, okay, it's a little different, all right? Because just because someone is very good as a player doesn't necessarily mean that they're very good at teaching someone else. So they're related skills, but they're not completely identical. A lot of non-chess players are kind of surprised that some of the world chess players actually have coaches. They have trainers, and the coaches are not as strong. So how is it that you can learn something from someone who is on paper weaker than you? Actually, in reality, the two players play together, and the coach is going to lose to the player that they're coaching. Well, okay, but that kind of gets into the role of what a coach can do, because a coach can step outside and kind of give guidance. But at that point, you're becoming a coach and a trainer and not really a teacher, because you're not at that point teaching information that the player doesn't already know. It's more of a helpful guide. So there is this kind of stratification that's built into the chess rating system.
And I think some of that issue with coaching, of course, comes up with like Olympic athletes too. Some of their coaches have done something before, but they're older. They can no longer do it, yet they have the wisdom, the broader outlook that the athlete could not have. Some things.
Right. Well, and you have a deal where you can step outside, and view it kind of independently. And actually Nakamura is one of the top chess players ever, and he has a coach that helps him that's actually much weaker as a player. I mean, the guy's about, he's only a little bit better than me, so he's not that good. But what is his role? His role is to prepare openings. So he goes and looks through opening systems and catches up on what all of Nakamura's opponents are doing, and kind of gives him some ideas about what he might try. And that's actually a very big part at the very top levels. Now, okay, for ordinary grandmasters, it's a different game than the world's elite. The world's elite have a lot more difficult problems than certainly than players like me. But one of the things that I would want to mention is that this idea of the stratification of skill levels, I think it really applies in all sorts of other areas of human ability. Mm-hmm. It's just that in a lot of these other areas, like mathematical ability, there's people that are better at math. Now, what does that mean? Okay, it can mean lots of different kinds of things, because math is not one skill. But in general, someone that's much more skilled at math, they're going to be able to handle problems at a higher level than someone who maybe isn't there yet. So this type of stratification, I think you see in any kind of an area. It's just you don't have a rating system for it. Mm-hmm. There's no, well, what's your math rating? There isn't anything like that.
Yeah.
Or what's your history rating? No.
And then anyway, having a degree, that's like the closest people have, but that's missing a lot. Thinking skills aren't involved. How people learn. Sure. So the fact that some people learn on their own. Newton didn't have a PhD in math. Archimedes didn't have a PhD in math.
Right.
Things like that.
Mike Tyson, he didn't have a PhD in math. I mean, basically, they're all the same.
Yeah. But right. But
it's a bit of a marker. I mean, if you have a PhD, that is a marker for something.
Yeah.
But it's the skill that you
right. Yeah. There's more involved.
So one analogy I would use sometimes, and I see this. This is actually, I'm borrowing this from agriculture, because when they did a lot of the original kind of scientific studies in agriculture and fertilizer, right? What do we need to do how do we fertilize crops in order to maximize yield? I mean, that's a standard kind of a problem in agriculture. And the analogy that they had was with the barrel. I don't know if you've ever heard this. So if you have a barrel, like for rain, it's made of staves, right? And all the staves are around the outside. And the barrel only holds as much as the lowest stave. Mm-hmm. So for example, if you have a field and it already has enough phosphorus, putting more phosphorus on isn't going to increase yield. What you have to do is find the minimum, the one that's lowest, and then that's where you direct your fertilizer, and that's how you increase the overall skill. So I think there's an analogy there with chess. So for example, people have opening skills, they have end game skills, and this is at a very high level, of course. skills with tactics, skills in defending positions that are inferior, and all of these kind of skills kind of meld together. And the effective skill that you present at a chessboard is kind of closest to whatever your lowest skill is. And so that's something that as a teacher you can kind of tie into with a student and say, all right, child X is very good at tactics. Definitely keep on doing that. Keep on learning tactics, but that isn't that's not what's driving your skill level at the moment, because you're much better at that than you are against other kinds of things. And so you can kind of break apart chess skill into a lot of different sub-abilities and, concentrate on the one that is given the most difficulties.
Kind of like preparing for the SAT or ACT. It's like, okay, you're good at reading, and you can improve more on that, and I recommend it, you should, but we really need to focus on the math. Oh, and then in English and writing, you know a lot of stuff, but you haven't learned parallelism or participles, so we need to dig into that, help you master that some.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think you see that type of, you break out the skills, and of course it all ends up coming together anyway.
Yeah.
In times of performance, Yeah, chess is there's a lot of skills involved in playing games in general, but chess is it's 100% known. I mean, everything is on the board right in front of you.
Very highly studied, yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, extremely highly.
Yes. So, on that scoring rating system, so it's 800 to 2600?
Well, you can actually have ratings that go down below that, and of course, if you have like a server on which people play chess, they will have their own rating systems. So you can end up with lots of different kinds of ratings. And there's ratings for classical time controls, which is where you have, let's say, 3 hours to complete your whole game. And then you have rapid, which is maybe 30 minutes. And then you have blitz, which is 5 minutes. And there's people that even play 1 minute chess. You have to make all of your moves in 1 minute. And then that's bullet. And so you have a different rating for that. Okay. It's very easy, especially with modern computers and internet, to have a rating and have it be calculated online. Very easy.
Is it mainly based on who you play and the games you win, or what?
Yes, it's all very mathematical. It's actually the Elo system. I don't know if you've heard that before.
Elo? The Electric Light Band? Oh yeah, I used to listen to them when I was in high school. Yeah.
The Elo system. Elo is kind of funny because it sounds like it's an acronym, but it's not. It's a mathematician. His name was Arpad Elo. He's from Hungary, and he created the rating system for chess. Now, the Elo system has actually since been ported to all kinds of other competitive activities. So tennis has Elo, and any kind of competitions, they generally calculate Elo scores as a way of measuring ranking but it originated in chess, and it's so basically if you win, your rating is going to go up, and depending on the rating of the person that you beat, if it's higher, then you'll go up higher. Also, as your rating tends to go higher, the fluctuations are smaller. Right? So you fluctuate quite a bit on the lower end of the scales. Once you go higher, it doesn't fluctuate quite as much. But it's all established. And the crazy thing now is they can actually, because computers have gotten so strong and there's so much computation available, they can kind of do correlations to various skill levels. And this was not something that existed, say, 15 years ago. But for example, like when computers evaluate chess positions, you talk about, all right, how many pawns are you ahead? Okay. And so generally, this is all of the different factors that constitute advantage, disadvantage, have these translations into approximate pawn value, right? So for instance, if you have a pass pawn, that one passed pawn, which has no pawns that can block its way from getting to the queen, is maybe worth 1.5 pawns just by itself. Okay. Well, there's plenty of stuff that's known about all of this, and so you evaluate position. So if you say, all right, here's a position, and let's say it's 15 moves into the game, and you show it to a super powerful computer, and it'll say, all right, in this position, white is about 1.5 pawns ahead, right? So that's fairly typical. And then it's black's turn to make a move. Well, black in that position can't make the game any better, right? The position is already 1.5 pawns. The best you can do is keep it at 1.5 pawns.
Mm-hmm.
And if you make a move that's a little bit weak, maybe it goes to 1.7 pawns. Or maybe you make a move that's much weaker, then you go to 1.8 pawns or 2.5 pawns. And so you can kind of correlate chess skill with distance from perfection, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, when I play, generally on average, every move, it's maybe 0.4, 0.5 pawns that I'm away from perfection.
Wow, cool.
Which, okay, it would be nice to play much better.
Plato was right. That proves it.
Well, actually, you can't.
The material world can never perfectly take the form.
You actually can't. There's this thing of God's rating, of absolute perfect play, and it can't be duplicated, but it can be glimpsed mathematically. So you can kind of get a sense of, all right, even though we know that we can't actually create an entity that plays perfectly, but we can see how the computers perform against each other, and then from that you can kind of get this asymptotic glimpse of what perfect play is like, and what that type of thing, which is really fascinating.
And asymptotic. All right, so what you want to explain asymptotic in case some people.
Oh yeah, so an asymptote is like a curve that comes close to a line but doesn't actually touch the line, and the farther out you go, it keeps getting closer and closer, but doesn't actually touch it.
So it'd be like if you're on a road and you walk over towards a railroad track, and then you never touch the railroad track, but you slowly keep getting closer and closer towards it. That'd be the railroad track would be like an asymptote.
Somewhat, although it's not really possible for human beings to behave in an asymptotic way.
Yeah.
I mean, you're going to get to the railroad track.
And you're going to get hungry. You're going to give up. You're like, why the hell am I doing this? It's like,
that's right. I'm just trying to prove some math concept, and I could be getting a sandwich right now. Yeah. No, math is an approximation of the world. It isn't exactly the way the world is, but it's very useful and tells a lot of useful information.
Important tool, yeah.
So getting back to the thing. So I'm about 0.4, 0.5 pawns away from perfection.
Wait.
Time.
Earlier, before we started, you said chess is mathematical, so therefore chess is a tool that approximates reality but never approaches it? Is that?
In some ways.
I'm just kidding. Okay, we'll discuss that later. Go back to that. Okay.
Because what's interesting, and this is something I tell my parents, or the parents of the kids who teaching. All right, chess is a game about decisions. Okay.
Decisions.
And for a kid, here's an opportunity. You have to make a decision, and you're not going to get any help. You don't get to ask your friend what to do, or the teacher, or your parents. You got to make the decision. And guess what? Sometimes you make a decision that maybe isn't all that good. And what happens then? Well, you lose the game.
Mm-hmm.
Then what?
Yeah, it's an aspect of chess I hadn't even thought about. Making decisions. Games in
general. You set them up and start again.
Yeah.
There's no harm that comes to you because you lost one game. Mm-hmm. You set them up again. And so here's an opportunity to practice decision making in a fairly confined way, in a way where, the impacts of your decision actually do matter to you, but it doesn't really matter in terms of your life. Mm-hmm. Not taking this thing in order to try to get into a university or any kind of a test where something is really important for your life. This is a game. And so by doing this, you can get a sense also of what you're like. How are you under pressure? Some people, they really rise to the occasion, and they love it when things get very tense. Other people, they don't like that at all, and you tend to fall to pieces when things get very tense. And just knowing that about yourself is tremendously useful for yourself in your life. And it gives you a chance to practice all of these kinds of situations and circumstances. Because you play enough chess, you're going to have it. You have the game completely winning, and then, dang, you just lost because you were playing too quickly or you got overexcited. All of those lessons are there in the game, and they're lessons that you can take with you in life. And you can learn the lessons without suffering any really serious bad side effects.
Yeah, that's one reason why people have used chess for hundreds of years to practice military tactics.
Yes. Although
excuse me,
its applicability for warfare in general is a little because in chess you know everything, right?
Yeah, right.
And in warfare, the big thing is you have no real idea. You're preparing for circumstances, but it never goes the way you want it to in warfare.
Especially if Hannibal's involved. Hannibal will really throw you for a loop.
Sure.
Or whoever it was that beat Hannibal. I forgot the Roman who studied Hannibal instead of studying Romans.
Scipio Africanus?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah. But
well, in most of the world, or at least in the Russian part of the world, the bishop is slon, which is, I believe that's right, I believe that's how you pronounce it in Russian. And that word means elephant. So in Russia, the bishops are elephants.
Huh, wow. From Hannibal?
Could be. Yeah, or India, The theory is that chess originated, in Arabian Peninsula, maybe a little bit more easterly into India, and then of course it traveled down the merchant roads, and as it moved in different directions, it got altered and changed. You have like a Thai chess, you have shogi, chaturanga, I think was one of the original versions of this. And then when it went in the Western direction, you adopted some additional rules. The original bishop was called an alfil, and it moved like a checkers piece. It just jumped. That was it. But when the game came into Europe in the late Middle Ages, 1400s, 1600s, you started getting these new rules. One is where the bishops moved along the diagonals completely, became a more powerful piece. The queen used to be the advisor. The Fiers, and it only moved one square in any direction, just like the king. Only you could actually, you could lose your queen and still be in the game. And then they adopted this new rule called the Mad Queen, where the queen moves any distance. And what they kind of discovered, there's all sorts of things. And then the pawn, you can move 2 squares forward. So these kind of move innovations happened between the 1400s and the 1600s in Europe, and that's where the modern game of chess came about.
Oh, interesting. Huh. And so far as the chess war thing, there are some games, though, that, using some games is a thing that people are doing more in modern times to prepare for warfare, since it's more intellectual. And actually, listen to a book on Audible. I think it was called Crows and Wolves, Ravens and Wolves, something like that, about how it was specifically because the English developed a game to simulate submarine warfare that they were able to defeat the Germans. They were able to test certain things and see if they actually worked. They actually used a game. Like, one guy thought it was something he did that helped him defeat some Germans, but the game showed it was wrong. And they'd come up with new strategies and tactics, and women were very critical in doing that. Unfortunately, there's not enough documentation. It was secretive, it was top secret, things like that. So, I'd love to really get into the thinking skills and deeper mental contributions involved, but at this point in history, it looks like it's not going to be possible for anybody to write a book like that, because a lot of, they couldn't make notes. A lot of the people are passed away. No one knows about the stuff, so it's just disappeared culturally now. But
yeah, there's some kinds of things that do end up disappearing. The Antikythera mechanism from ancient Greece. We discovered this thing, and then wow, it turns out they could do a whole lot of mechanical calculations way earlier than anyone suspected.
And then you want to describe that for folks? What was that thing?
What's that?
You want to describe that for folks?
Antikythera? Yeah, It's actually the name of an island. And so in a shipwreck, they found this mechanism underneath it. And it wasn't until they x-rayed the thing many years later, they found it had all these mechanical gears in it. And it actually approximated, it was able to calculate positions of the planets and the orbits and a whole lot of other stuff. Mm-hmm. So it was something that they kind of carried on board ships as part of the technology. And it was lost. We didn't even know that they had this stuff. But,
and wasn't it more complex and advanced than people thought that was possible for the time?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. It was a mechanical calculator. Is kind of what it was.
Basically,
it was able to do the kinds of things we do electronically, only it was done with gears and different sizings of gears, and the calculations that are involved in that are quite complex, but they could do it and did. So, yeah, we have a new thing now in the chess world with AlphaZero. I don't know how much of that has percolated outside of chess, but AlphaZero, computer chess has come a long way. When they first came out with computer machines that could play, I was actually to the point where I could defeat them because they weren't quite that good. But that didn't last very long. They've become much, much better. And now, especially, I think, so it was around 1996, I believe, that the first Grandmaster lost to a chess computer. And then, so that was, maybe it was 89. And then it was in 2005, I believe, was the last time that a human being was able to defeat a computer at tournament time controls. And since then, it's not even a contest anymore. They're so much stronger than people. But the way they play is very, very different. And what I could explain to you, the people who aren't in chess, the computer will give you an evaluation of the position. It'll say this position is 1.8. Okay, if I make this move, it's 1.8. If I make this move, it's 1.2. So that's less. So I'm going to make the one that's 1.8. Okay. What they don't care about at all is how difficult the position is to play, because all positions are equal for the computer. They don't care. They just look and look and look, and okay, everything's fine. So, but for people, like when you have stuff going on all over the place and your king is exposed, it's so much more difficult to come up with the move that really works. So you shy away from those kinds of positions. And in fact, it's bad to play into a position that is equal, but gives you all of these opportunities to go wrong. So, but the computers don't care about that, right? So they will just play and play and play. And the analogy that I heard, and this is from a long time ago, was the computer will make a move and you'll go, no! And then it turns out it works out. And the analogy is, okay, you put in your star basketball player and he dribbles down the board. And as soon as he gets over half court, he takes a shot. Like this giant 3-point. And it's like, no! And then it goes in and you're like, okay.
Yeah.
I guess, all right, fine. And in fact, there are people that try to use computers to cheat. And mathematically, that you can detect that. They can it's quite secretive how they do this, but basically anybody who's getting computer assistance, okay, if you do it for one move and that's it, okay, maybe, but if you do it for any length of time in a chess game, you will get caught doing that. They can there is a big difference from the way computers play and the way people play.
Interesting. But so what else would you have to say about the nature of chess? It's a game. Have anything to say about games or chess being mathematical?
Okay. All right. In terms of move selection and how you play, you really can't play without principles. Okay, you need principles which are guides to action. And simple chess principles might be, in the beginning, get your pieces out rapidly, control the center, get castled. These are the types of things that you would call chess principles. There are other kinds of principles that are much more detailed, that arise in specific kinds of positions. But the interesting thing for me is the principles that guide move selection, they're all a consequence of the rules of the game. Mm-hmm. So the rules say this, and as a result of that, there is a certain way of playing that's well. So a very basic thing in chess is the point value of the pieces. Okay, so the rook is about 5 pawns, the bishop is about 3.5 pawns. And so the rook is a superior piece to the bishop. Now that's not always the case. There are positions in which the bishop is actually going to hold its own. But that's a kind of a rule that it's like, well, why is that the case? I mean, who decided that the rook should be 5 pawns and the bishop should be 3.5 pawns? Well, that's something that emerges. It emerges in play. Okay, and as a signal for this, if you have a king and a bishop versus a lone king, you cannot force checkmate. But if you have a king and a rook, then you can. And so that's kind of a consequence of the fact that the rook is a stronger piece. And why is the rook a stronger piece? Well, it's because of the rules that you have to checkmate in order to win the game. And you can force a checkmate with a king and a rook, and you cannot do it with a king and a bishop. So all of these kinds of principles that you can ultimately are consequences of the rules.
Mm-hmm. And anything else to say about how it's mathematical?
Well, actually, that whole concept of the point value of the pieces dates back, hundreds of years where people talked about the relative values of these. But nowadays, that with databases and with computer programs, this is another aspect of chess. You have chess databases, which are collections of games. And of course, there have been millions and millions of chess games played now. And, when you go to prepare against a particular player, you can go and look at the games that they've played. They're in the databases. And you can see what types of positions they like and how you can adjust in order to try and overcome this particular opponent. So, like, for example, in the opening, you'll get a position, okay, it's 9 moves in an IMSO Indian. You can go to the database and say, all right, who's had this position before and what moves did they decide to play? So you can end up learning opening systems that way. So yeah, the kind of stuff that's out there with chess is really quite strong. I actually did hear once an analogy to baseball, of all things. One of my friends is very into baseball, and one of the things he said that he liked about it was any situation that you get into in a baseball game is one that has already happened previously. Okay, there's runners on first and third, and there's this, all of these kinds of details about the game, and so it's a game of percentages, right? If the pitcher's right-handed, and you have all of these kinds of things, this has happened 20 times in the past, and if you threw this pitch, then this happened, and so you can use this information to kind of to play. All right, that's wild. You wouldn't think that's like that, but okay, baseball is.
Yeah, and maybe some of that's come up in Moneyball and things like that. People using data analysis and data mining to figure out how to put a team together at low cost that functions really well. And what I think that happened, made into a movie, and so a team won the championship, something like that, does really well, instead of having to spend millions as some New York teams do.
Yes, and of course, once you do that, then everybody copies that strategy, and it's quite effective. I mean, so this is I kind of touched with this a little bit earlier with AlphaZero. So we had all of these different kinds of computer programs that have all been basically the same. They just have stronger hardware, stronger software, and you end up getting super powerful. Houdini was a top computer opponent, and then Stockfish is the new one that's like the top. But then AlphaZero came along, and AlphaZero was completely different because it was custom designed. So it had custom chips that were particularly built for the purpose of this. And what it did was they fed it the rules, and they say, here's the rules of the game. And AlphaZero played against itself and independently learned how to play. Through playing not millions of games, but many, many more than that. And through self-play, you get better and better and better. And it was able to determine all sorts of things. Well, then, now that this has been going on, and so you had this entity that basically was able to duplicate all of the knowledge of human history about chess in a day and a half. some ridiculously small amount of time. And so then they test it out. They play it against Stockfish. Now, Stockfish was handicapped in some respects. But AlphaZero basically did beat Stockfish pretty handily in this kind of thing. And so we have this situation where novel software, novel hardware can learn a game to perfection, or at least close to perfection, better than any other entity. Well, guess what they've done now? Now they've taken the same basic thing and applied it to other games. So AlphaZero, AlphaGo, but you can take any kind of a game and have this AI, learning system that gets put together that accommodates this, and that's quite extraordinary. And that's, I think, the direction where some AI research is going, where through self-play, it can end up independently deriving a lot of these principles that humans have worked on for centuries. So it's remarkable.
Now, is there anything mathematical about chess other than the point value, or does that point value sum up everything about the rules and principles?
It's emerged. It emerges.
Yeah.
Now, for example, there's the knight is worth about 3.5 points, 3.5 pawns, and bishop is worth 3.5. So how very odd that you have these two pieces that move very differently from each other that are approximately the same value. Well, that's just it's a coincidence. Is what it's working. It's like, the moon and the sun are approximately the same disk size in this thing. Well, why is that? It's just an accident that is that way. So, and if you made the game a little bit bigger, like if you played chess on a 9x9 board instead of 8x8, then the bishop would be stronger and the knight would be weaker.
Interesting.
And if you played it on 7x7, then the knight would be stronger than the bishop. So you have, it's just on an 8x8 board that they're approximately the same.
Wow.
Now it also depends on the number of pawns that are on the board. So chess positions that have lots and lots of pawns, the knights are generally better. And the ones that have fewer pawns, the bishops are better. And of course, because of the rules, nothing ever comes back onto the board. So when you get pawn exchanges, that's kind of the direction it always goes. So as a result, there's a general tendency to prefer bishops very slightly over knights. But of course, there's also, that's just one principle. Bishops are a little better than knights overall, but not in every position, and people happily exchange bishops for knights. So maybe that's a little bit of too advanced of a principle.
But so it's a bit about chess, the history of it. Everybody knows chess pretty much. So
everybody's an expert.
Yeah. Everybody's an expert.
I've had people talk to me. Well, you know what chess is all about, and they're talking to tell me about why chess is so great, and what about it, what you need to do in order to be a good player. I'm like, really?
I wouldn't have known. Thanks.
I know. It's funny. It doesn't happen all that often.
What are some of the things that people say? Some of the mistakes?
Well, I think in general, people who are very skilled in one area believe that they have the similar kind of skills in something like chess. And really, the skill levels are way high on this. It's really hard to kind of convey the kinds of things that human beings are capable of in terms of making decisions about chess moves. If we played across the screen or something and you didn't know who was sitting there, you couldn't tell the difference between me and the world champion. We would both just beat you, and then that would be it. Yeah. And really, you wouldn't be able to tell. Yeah. There's no stratification. Whereas, in fact, me against the world champion, I'm not going to do all that well. On paper, I'm supposed to get one draw every 20 games. Good luck with that.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm just lost before I start. But people don't really, they're like, okay, people are good, and then you're okay. But no, it goes well beyond that in terms of what people are capable of. And I think that applies in lots of areas. Human skill is quite profound. And people can be really, really, really good at things.
Yeah. So let's get into some of the maybe thinking skills, pedagogy of teaching and doing. So what are some of the things involved in teaching chess? How do you do it? All that?
Well, generally, of course, I'm going to play a sample game and see how they go about making decisions. Some people play very quickly. Some people are really hesitant. They want to take a huge amount of time. There is definitely a factor in the amount of time that you spend, but there's a limit to that. And in fact, here's another mathematical thing. I'm giving you all these little tidbits, right? Because you have the rating system and because you have all of this proxy calculations as to skill levels, you can actually determine effective skill levels at various time controls. Okay, so there's some people that, all right, if you have a certain skill level, let's say you play daily chess. Daily chess is where you have many days to decide upon a move. Okay, and this is a very casual thing, but correspondence was a thing, and there's people that play under these circumstances. So if you have 4 hours to decide upon a move, you can achieve a certain level of skill, right? But there's a limit to that, right? Me spending 4 hours on a move, I'm not going to be able to beat the world champion, okay? Mm-hmm. And in fact, the world champion at tournament time controls does better than I would do at 4 hours. And in fact, okay, I'll just cut right to the chase. When he plays at 1 second per move, his moves are better than mine.
Wow.
On average. He plays better than I do at 1 second a move, no matter how much time I have to think.
Just that habit formation from doing it a lot?
Yes.
Kind
now,
of like
that
Bruce
is actually
Lee.
true only of the very, very top players. Right? So if you have somebody that's, say, number 50 in the world, and you give them only 1 second per move, and then you give me 4 hours a move, I'm probably going to beat that person.
Okay.
Because that's enough of a handicap. It's just that the skill levels at the very top are completely insane.
Interesting. Wow.
Right. And this is, okay, I can play 1 second a move and beat anybody. Anybody off the street. It's not hard for me to play very, very well at that kind of time control. Now against tournament players, I'm going to have difficulties. If they're allowed more time. Anyway, that's just another. It gives a glimpse of how good these players are, without really. It's not magic. It's not like they're being deceptive at their skills.
Maybe like in cards. Some of that's involved. Some of the psychology.
Your
opponent out.
Right, with magicians and things like that.
Well, I mean card games like at casinos.
Right. Yeah.
Wearing hats, wearing sunglasses, so people can't read you.
Yeah. There's probably some of that. I really like being in the world of chess because it gives me an idea of what other worlds are like that I'm not a part of. That I like mathematics. I actually sometimes go to Terry Tao's, WordPress site to read what he says about mathematics. And I can't follow half of it, but it's just neat to see somebody who's just so good at it. How is it that they go about trying to talk about these things? It's neat trying to figure out a few things here and there, but I'm never going to be able to really, really follow it. That's okay. Yeah. I know, from what I know about chess, I know what it's like to be really good at mathematics and what kind of work is done in that field. And okay, it's a pleasure there.
Yeah. So when you're teaching someone, first thing you do is play them. Might be like someone playing tennis. First thing they're going to do is watch a game or play with the student a little bit, see what they're like, and go from there.
Yes. And of course, with live, you can you say things, and then, so there's always like a dial up, dial down type of thing, because I have several of my students that went on to become masters.
Cool.
And when they're really good, I can speak extremely quickly, right? And I can cover stuff very fast because I don't have to explain all sorts of other things that are present. Okay, well, with actually one of the kids, when I first taught him, his parents insisted and all this, and he was a young kid, and he really was not very good at that time, And I kind of showed him a few pointers, basic kinds of things, so that he could get ready for his tournament. All right. Well, now years later, I'm teaching him. I don't have to slow down at all. I can go full speed in discussing everything about what I'm seeing. And he's able to absorb things at that rate. So you kind of monitor how well the students are picking up on various things, and then kind of dial it back, dial it down. You test. You say, all right, well, what kinds of things do you do in this position? There's actually a really funny thing I'll do sometimes. So we'll get to a position, and I'll say, all right, so what are some moves that you might make here? And they'll suggest one, and that's move A. And okay, there's another move. It's move B. And then I'll say, all right, which of these two moves is better, move A or move B, right? And they'll cogitate it on it for a while, and okay, we'll talk about it, and they'll come up with something. And then it turns out there's a move C that's a checkmate in one move.
Huh. Yeah.
Now, why is it that they didn't go and pick move C? Because they didn't even have it as an option.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so that's actually a basic kind of a skill, is what are your options? You get to choose on the moves. What's the list of moves that you can pick from? Because it turns out it's actually pretty hard to come up with a robust list of candidate moves. That's actually a difficult skill. And okay, that's something that you can simply practice. And at that point, you don't have to decide which one is the best. You just go, all right, I want to get my list of moves, and start putting that together and train your brain to do that kind of work.
Yeah, I think some of that should be done more in education. It's very important. Helps you develop for the real world. And some math is just, okay, here's the one way. And it's important. We have to learn one thing, focus on it, practice that one thing some. But there should be some times where you're saying, okay, here's a problem. How many different ways can you do it? Just like I'm a certified fitness trainer, and some of the stuff we do, we don't learn one way to pick stuff up, because in the real world, there is not one way to pick stuff up. What is the situation? What if you're holding a kid and you got to pick something up? In the real world, what if you have a bag and you drop something? What if someone's coming after you? What's the size of it? What's the shape? So we have to learn all kinds of different ways to pick something up off the ground. Or, like in SAT, ACT, I do that too. I go, okay, here's a problem. Sometimes you got to get some students to start thinking and quit being hard-headed. But, well, I did it fine. I go, well, is this problem going to be on the test you're going to take? No, you're never going to see this again. What we need are methods. We need more tools in the toolbox. How many different ways can we solve this problem? We can put numbers in. We can use our calculator. We can do this. You got to have the tools, just like you're saying. I think that
that's hard. That's hard, to come up with that list. So this is one of the nice things about the chess world, is because that list of options is finite, right? There's actually, in any position, there is a number of legal moves, and that's it. And in fact, actually, that's an exercise that I go through. All right, what are all the legal moves? It's like in politics and economics too.
There are many ways to make money, but not all of them are legal. Let's stick to the legal, please. Anyway, sorry.
Yeah. No, actually, one of the things that I do a lot, there's chess puzzles. For a very simple example, mate in two. Okay, so here's a chess puzzle, and it's a checkmate in two moves, and implicit in that is there's one move selection that will guarantee a checkmate in two moves, and all of the others won't do that. And so then that's the puzzle. How do you figure out, what that is? Mm-hmm. All right. So one of the techniques I like doing this kind of a technique, even though most chess positions are not analogous to a mate in two puzzle, because the puzzles end up looking really weird. They're not like game positions because they're constructed so that there's only one move that works.
Yeah.
And they're constructed also to kind of mislead you and to say, oh, you could try this move, but that one doesn't work.
Oh, that sounds kind of Montessori too. It's like you got to be very knowledgeable to make it up, so it's that one thing that can do it, not some others. And oh, sorry, I didn't think of that. Although I'm sure that happens sometimes. We're not omniscient, but that's like Montessori having a prepared environment so the student can be independent and think through things. That's interesting.
Yeah. So then, and at that point, then coming up with your list of legal moves is actually a helpful solving technique, because it's got to be one of them, right? And so you can kind of take your master list and shrink it down. And that's hard, even though the problem is finite. there's only so many that are on that list. Coming up with that list is hard, and working it down of which one it could be, that's actually hard too. So that's the chess problem world. It's not puzzles is things, but problems is the term. And yeah, there's definitely some overlap, players and problemists. But then, of course, there's some chess players that don't do chess problems at all. Anyway, chess is a very deep world.
Yeah. How long might you have to give someone when you're giving them a lesson and teaching them if you do the thing where you just list the possibilities? Where, okay, you did that. What else could you do? How long does they usually think about it? You give them 2 minutes, 20 minutes?
No, not 20. That's a little too long. Generally when I'm teaching, it's anticipated that they're going to do things on their own at some later play games. They're going to do some other things. So for the time that we have, if they're taking more than 15 seconds or so to get moving on it, then I'll kind of step in and say, all right, well, how about this? You can have the questions that are a little open-ended, and then you can kind of take the questions and make it a little more specific. All right, what are the number of legal moves in this position? And if they're having trouble with that, then you say, all right, well, let's start at the first row. What are the pieces along the first row? Okay, here's the rook. What are the things there? And so you build this kind of systematic way of going about these things. And it's analogous to, weight training for athletes.
Yeah.
When you're in a football game, you're not actually taking the bar and pushing it out like this. But okay, you are using the muscles in a different way.
Yeah.
So you train them with the weights, and then you go take action, and it's a similar type of training.
Or martial arts, yeah.
Very much so, yes.
And
so, martial arts is another great world.
Yeah. So when you're doing some of this and you ask them the question, so you might actually be giving them a lot of time, but you're guiding them through it, so you're both talking. So maybe it does take 20 minutes for them to think through something, but it's guided thinking.
Yes.
Yeah. Yes. It's not just like you're sitting there and smoking a cigar or pipe or being Sherlock Holmes for 20 minutes while the person's alone. You're asking them questions and guiding them through it the whole time.
Yes. Yeah. It's got to be interactive to really get the most out of a training session. Mm-hmm. You want to see that mind be engaged. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, by the time people are interested in learning about this, taking lessons, they're already pretty interested, right? So it's not that hard to get people to be excited about it.
And they're able to come up with, they have a lot of experience, they've played, they know a lot, so they're able to generate possibilities and they're used to it. It's become mental habit already.
Yeah. Going over games is actually really a very common thing to do.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here's a game. Let's go over the game.
Like something they already played? Something someone else played? Or something they played, Yeah, kind of like...
Both work very well. The one nice thing about going through Grandmaster games is that's what chess looks like when it's played very well. And so you kind of absorb, this thing. Like beginners. Like for example, let's say you set up a chess game, and your first move, you take a rook in the corner, and you pull it out of the corner and put it right in the center. Well, that's illegal, right? Rooks don't move like that. So you don't even consider that as an option. You don't consider it because it's not even legal, right? Well, as you get stronger, there's certain categories of moves that you just don't even consider because it's obviously not a move that's worth playing. And so a lot of times what will happen is people will play moves. Now, of course, I'm much more sensitive to that type of stuff now. So people will play something and I'm like, oh, okay, there's something wrong with that move, but I don't know immediately what it is.
Yeah.
So, okay, we'll have to try and find out. And a lot of times the thing that's wrong with a move is that there's something better, right? So if there wasn't this better option, then that move would actually be okay. Mm-hmm. But there's a better option, and therefore you should go with the better option. All right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to go over the games like that. I think that should be done more in education. You see it's done with some sports teams, especially higher end. Mm-hmm. That's critical to look at their performance and evaluate it and break it down in every detail. Mm-hmm. And some of that might have been what probably went into helping Usain Bolt because he's taller, and so he starts out slower than people who are shorter. The first 20 or 30 yards, someone who's shorter has an advantage on developing acceleration. But once you get to that point, he's got the advantage in getting a high velocity and going far. So what they did, and I've seen in read this, seen some videos talking about how they coached him. Instead of picking his feet up as normal, they had him keep his feet lower, a lower trajectory towards the ground, more elliptical, rather than like circular. So folks, it'd be like if you get a circle or balloon and you smash it in a little bit, you know, and instead of being a circle, like half circle off the ground, you smash down the circle so it stretches out further and it's lower to the ground. It'd be more elliptical like that. They had him do something like that with his feet so he could develop more acceleration at the beginning and be further ahead relatively than he otherwise would have been, and then power through at the end with using his higher height, bigger legs to go through. But sports teams do that. I'm sure they did that with a lot of video. And that's a big value in really learning to write well. Kind of the same thing, evaluating your own essay. You play a game, you evaluate it. You write an essay, you evaluate it. That's how you learn to write better. And just playing games alone and never thinking about them, you can learn some, but if you just write an essay and never do it again, you're really not going to learn as much about writing essays and thinking as you would if there was more interaction and cycling. Like, I think they should, maybe not every essay because they might run out of time, but if they'd go through at least some 3 times, the student writes it, turns it in, corrections, you got to do those, rewrite, then that would accelerate the process of developing good, not just good writing skills, but better thinking skills. It'd really improve education, I think. But
that's absolutely true. Yeah, the iteration there is essential to learning. You know, no matter how good you are, you can't get better if you don't have this feedback loop. Yeah. It can't just be information coming into you and then that's it. You have to put it back out into the world some way and then look at what you did and how does it go and make adjustments. I mean, even the very best in the world still are going through that kind of a process. Mm-hmm. You know, you evaluate what's going on and that iteration you're talking about is key to all learning.
Process, yeah. Or just like you said the best people have a coach. It's like I've heard from some people that say in terms of fitness training, weightlifting and stuff, he who has himself for a coach has a fool for a coach.
Yes. Yeah, lawyers. Anyone who is their own lawyer has a fool for a client.
Yeah, true. But and so when you're doing the problems thing, it's kind of the same iterative process as when you're asking them the possible ways to go through what else you could do in a move. You ask them something, and then what's on the first row, what's on the second row. Keep asking them questions and driving it forward. Okay.
Yeah, and that's establishing a base level of skill. Mm-hmm. You know, with these kinds of things. Mm-hmm. The one nice thing about chess is there's videos out there where people are doing analysis of games, etc. And the very best chess players in the world will absolutely talk about what happened in their game. You know, and so you can actually listen to them and you hear what they have to say about this.
Wow.
Yeah, I do think that's actually kind of a big tell for skill level is the vocabulary and how you discuss problems in the field. You know,
makes sense.
This type of thing.
Like for anything.
And you can really kind of tell. You know, it's not that often, but on occasion you get players who really are not very good that like to talk. You know, and so they'll start talking about chess positions, and it's like they're really missing a lot. You know, and so they're saying a few things, but it's like, no, that's not really what's critical here in this position. You know, no, that's not a really common situation. I shouldn't.
Sounds good to people who don't know what they're talking about, but then to people like you can take it apart, and the person doesn't know much about as much as they say.
That's not common. I should, and I certainly am not going to be mentioning names or whatever because people are hiding behind this. But when you see people online that are discussing things, there's skill levels involved with this, and and you see the commentators as well. Now, of course, anybody nowadays, if you have a computer engine and you're watching people play live, this is another kind of a thing, right? You go to Wimbledon and you watch them play tennis. but it's really kind of hard to. Well, what would I do if I were on the court and the ball was coming at me like that? For players who are very good, possibly you could do that. But with chess, hey, that position is the same. You could say, well, if I was there, I would move the bishop and it would go like this, and so there's actually more of a direct connection as an audience member to what the players are going through.
Yeah.
But of course, what they do is, but nowadays everybody's got a computer engine sitting at the side, and they're looking at the computer going, oh well, he should move the knight. And
That's funny.
He does something different. I'm like, why didn't he do what you think? Well, okay, it's a lot. People underestimate how hard it is.
I don't remember who it is, but yeah, in terms of like tennis versus chess, some things like chess and maybe golf, there's a name, like people categorize some things like that, especially chess, but then there's other things that, I don't know, they chose the word wicked, where some things are just wicked, where there's so much unpredictable, you just can't do the same thing. Like, I don't know, maybe chess versus some obstacle course competition where there's mud and all this other stuff, and you can't just say, well, I would have done that, because there's so much going on and it's so complicated,
right.
And you got being tired and fatigue and mental focus and all this other stuff taken into account. So it's just a categorically different situation.
Well, and then you have games like Mafia or Werewolf or the game Survivor, where people vote each other out. And in those kinds of games, the more skilled you are and the more known how skilled you are, then now you're a target. So the players who are best at it, the ones who are highly skilled and not known as that. Yeah. So it's a weird mix, those kinds of games. They're psychology games.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not really the best at that point. We've been binge watching we watched all the Survivor seasons this whole year. That's what we've been doing on our internal lockdown here. And it's been great. I mean, we talk about it, right? So that's, and as a game, of course, it's very unique. You don't see that type of game mechanics in the real world so much. In the real world, you're on an island, you cooperate. Everybody cooperates, and that's how you survive. But
even Lord of the Flies, the book, there's actually a real situation where kids didn't do the opposite. The novel Lord of the Flies, where the kids go after each other.
Very much. But no, my daughter has had it in school. This past year.
But there's actually a real live situation where something like that happened, and the kids cooperated, and it was totally 100% different than what the novel says. It was interesting.
Yeah, right.
They cooperated.
Still an entertaining plot for a novel, but and of course it spawned a whole world, of stuff that's happened.
So what else? All right. What else is involved in teaching? What else do you do? Any more pedagogy involved in all that?
Well, the barrel staves is one thing, where you look and find, all right, what's the weakest part of your game, and then you go to work on that. You definitely.
How do you determine that? You've already, since they're so advanced, you already know.
Well, that's actually if you're at a certain skill level and you're evaluating people whose skill levels are much lower, it's actually fairly easy to kind of piece together this. It's hard. It's much harder to do that. For people who are much better than you, to say, all right, what are the weaknesses in this person's game? It's really hard for me to come out and make those kinds of evaluations. But somebody who's up and coming, you can kind of see where they are with their stuff. This is actually true in athletics as well. Any kind of martial art, there's some things that some kids are good at and some they're not as good at, and you can see my son was a competitive trampolinist. So he did stuff on the trampoline, and so I was involved in that world for a bit, and it was interesting to see. Now it's a judged game, so it's a little different. You have the judges who are evaluating performance, but there's kids. Some kids do the twists really well, and other kids don't, and other kids. So there's like this whole different set of performance levels in all of these different areas, and it all kind of combines to equal this level of performance.
Just like a lot of other things. Tennis, some people have a good serve, maybe not so good at the backhand, great backhand, not so good at like, I don't know, whatever else. Or
yes, exactly. That's exactly it. And of course, a player who's much better than I at tennis would be able to say, all right, here's the kinds of things that you could do to really kind of improve your game. And you do reach I heard a story, this is about figure skating. There's a figure skaters who never quite get that first spin, where you what's the name of it? Where you do a twist and you land and you go forward. Okay.
I don't know.
Well, then there's a double axle. I think they call it an axle. So a single axle. So there's only so many of the community that ends up getting that as a skill. And then of those, there's a small percentage that ever get to the double axle. And then of those, it's a much smaller. So there's a funnel that happens that as your skill levels increase. And it's a consequence of natural ability, but it's also a consequence of how much effort do you really want to put into this? Because there's lots of other kinds of things that you could go and do, and for some people, it's just not worth it to try to get that last 0.1% of maximization.
Yeah. And then,
so
it's interesting getting a proper master. Sometimes, like someone I know of, I don't know personally, but Carlos Condit, MMA fighter, world champion. He had great coaches, unquestionable. Some of the best, in the world, I guess. I'm not an expert, but, given where he was, he must have had and got access to that. They weren't stupid. They knew their stuff. But just because of some assumptions and some premises held in the culture in general, not their fault. It's not a weakness on their fault, but just because of the culture, they knew he was weak in balance. I'm not weak. Clearly, he's a world champion, but he could improve it. But let me clear that. I don't want him to come straighten me out. Okay, I want to keep my face ugly, but not bruised. I'll say ugly and not ugly and bruised. If it was bruised and ugly, it'd be worse. But so they knew some things he could do to improve, but they didn't, because of our background and stuff. They didn't know what he could do. They didn't have good programming for him. So it was this guy, Arent, who's studied functional fitness, looked at the history of human movement. He's influenced by this guy, George Hebert, French naval officer in, I think, World War I, who found out that, some moderns couldn't respond to a rescue as well as he wanted. But then some others, like some so-called primitives who were good at the movement humans have been doing for millennia, they were better able to respond. He learned from them, brought this into play, this more like traditional, real functional fitness. So Erwan does this, I forgot what George Herbert's thing was called, slips in my mind right now, but Erwan calls his system movement natural. That's the French, of course, MoveNat for short. Natural movement in English, movement natural in French. But because, so you can see with all that background, what he's learned, he's got more of a focus on balance and knows what to do. He's gone beyond some of the premises some people might have about fitness in the culture, where it's like a gym thing. Not that Carlos Condit's coaches are like that entirely, but with that, he was actually able to help Carlos Condit do some drills and develop his balance in a way that even his coaches hadn't thought of. And that's an important thing in teaching and coaching too. Checking your premises, questioning if you're really following convention, if you're digging down to fundamentals and principles or not. What's really going on? What can I do to help? And again, just like you were saying with the top 10%, you only have so much time. You can't do everything. We got to enjoy life. We got to eat and sleep and spend time with friends. But there should be at least that awareness. Make the culture better. Learning from other people, being involved, being able to quickly transition to teach someone a balance skill or refer them to someone else right away, instead of, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know who to use. Oh, well.
Well, we're all muddling through. Yeah.
But so yeah, when you got those basic ideas, it helps. Then when you look beyond that, think about what might be going on fundamentally. Look at a deeper classification. So instead of thinking about football, well, football is a sport. Why do people need to be good at sport? Well, sport is a human physical activity. So actually, I should be thinking about what makes someone good at human physical activities to help them be a better football player, and then specialize in from there. Conceptualizing, classifying, thinking like that. Going broader is going to help you focus more on joint health and everything, which will help in football. There's things like that that could help. And some of that stuff should be more in math. Clearly it's...
Well, I definitely took care of my joints in my football career, and I did that by not ever playing.
Yeah, I was going to say, you played football in high school or college or what? Huh. Not? Yeah.
No. I did touch football here and there. That was fun.
Huh, yeah. Huh, yeah. That's funny.
Yeah, the only winning move is not to play.
Caught me off guard there. Yeah. I was like, whoa. Not so much caught me off guard, but I was surprised. I was drum roll, waiting for it. But,
all right. Well, I don't know how much your listeners can digest in one go here. So we've been going for a while. I think we covered a lot of ground here.
Yeah. And I've been getting a little hungry, like 40 minutes ago. So. Cool. But yeah, so that's a lot of good discussion of chess, what it is, your background, teaching it. Anything else you want to say about teaching or learning it for now?
Not really for now. I mean, we covered really a lot more than I expected to.
Cool.
With this. So yeah, the whole, I mean, pedagogy is, the important thing for pedagogy for me is, okay, how exactly do you pronounce that word? Because I actually had to look it up.
Yeah,
apparently there's like 5 different ways of pronouncing it, and they're all legitimate. I'm like,
yeah.
Well, what kind of chance does that give for teaching? Pedagogy.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's a good word.
Mm-hmm.
I think people would use it more if they knew that they were pronouncing it correctly. Because I certainly would be in that category. But you've said pedagogy enough that I'm comfortable saying it that way also.
Cool. Yeah.
So we can both be wrong together then.
Sweet. That's what I tell my students sometimes. Like, we're in a group class, someone says something, is this the right answer? I go, that's what I got. I think we were both right or we were both wrong.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So thank you, Chris. Appreciate the talk. Appreciate the time. Awesome.
All right. Yeah, I don't know. I will see how you carve this up. Because it's going to be one show. It'll be a long one. So
it's going to be raw. It's not carved. It's real and raw. Straight up. All right. So I'll go ahead and stop this. And